China revives $80 billion Transcontinental Railway in America's backyard. And the US can't ignore it. A train loaded with rare earths, soybeans, and lithium departs from Brazil's Atlantic coast. It races through the Amazon rainforest, crosses the majestic Andes, and heads straight to a deep-water port on Peru's Pacific coast, ready to sail to Shanghai. No Panama Canal, no US customs, not a second delayed by the US dollar. This isn't science fiction. This is the South American Transcontinental Railway, a 3,750-kilometer megaproject that China is reviving, aiming not just to transport goods, but to reshape the strategic supply chains of the Western Hemisphere. Why is China restarting this project now, after nearly a decade of silence? Why are South American nations partnering with Beijing instead of Washington? And could this be the first crack in the US's traditional influence over the continent? Join Top 10 Discoveries Official as we uncover China's latest infrastructure, ambition, where the numbers aren't just staggering but conceal Beijing's most subtle geopolitical leverage in South America yet. The South American Transcontinental Railway, also known as the Bi-Oceanic Railway or Transcontinental Railway, was first proposed in 2014. It's a tripartite initiative among Brazil, Peru, and China, launched under Presidents Dilma Rousseff, Brazil, and Ollanta Humala, Peru, aiming to build a railway linking two oceans, from the Atlantic, Brazil, to the Pacific, Peru, bypassing the Panama Canal. China pledged financial support and technology transfers, positioning the project as an extension of its Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, in South America. However, after initial technical surveys and intergovernmental summits, the project stalled due to four main reasons. Though once hailed as a railway alternative to the Panama Canal, connecting the Atlantic to the Pacific, the Brazil-Peru Transcontinental Railway languished for nearly a decade. At least four key factors, technical, political, social, and geopolitical, prevented progress despite backing from three major powers. First, the immense cost and extreme terrain. From its inception in 2014, preliminary studies warned the project could cost $60 to $80 billion, depending on the chosen route. Some independent sources, including European infrastructure research institutes, estimated total costs could exceed $72 billion, surpassing the projected budget for Vietnam's north-south high-speed railway. $58 billion. The challenge isn't just the route's length, but its extraordinarily complex terrain. The railway must traverse the Amazon rainforest, with high humidity, significant landslide risks, and fragile ecosystems. The Andes Mountains, with sections above 4,000 meters, requiring large-scale tunneling techniques akin to those in Switzerland or China. Operating and maintaining a railway through such terrain would incur extremely high ongoing costs and environmental risks. Second, opposition from indigenous communities and environmental concerns. A major obstacle is fierce resistance from indigenous organizations, environmental NGOs, and the international community. According to Dialogue Earth, the railway would cut through over 600 indigenous communities, including at least 15 uncontacted tribes living in complete isolation from the modern world. The impact extends beyond cultural and humanitarian issues, threatening a global ecosystem. The Amazon, covering over 50% of the world's remaining rainforest, is a critical carbon sink, often called the planet's lungs. The railway would require deforestation, road construction, bridges, and tunnels through pristine forests, while areas like the Iscanahua Reserve, already ravaged by illegal logging, are highly vulnerable. Third, political instability in Brazil and Peru. The period from 2015 to 2023 was marked by significant political turbulence in both Brazil and Peru. Brazil saw power shifts among opposing parties, from Rousseff to Temer, Bolsonaro, and Lula, each with differing foreign policy and infrastructure priorities, undermining long-term project continuity. Peru faced ongoing political and social unrest, with 6 presidents in under 8 years, alongside protests and policy crises. This instability left the project without a strong political champion to expedite procedures, planning, or international negotiations. Inconsistent public investment policies across administrations further stalled budgets and legal frameworks. Finally, Western concerns about China's geopolitical influence. From the outset, China's role as financier and constructor made the project a geopolitical flashpoint rather than a purely infrastructure endeavor. The US and Western nations viewed it as a Chinese move to control transcontinental logistics. The railway's direct connection from Brazil, the world's agricultural powerhouse, to Peru's Chancay port, owned by China's COSCO, without passing through US-influenced zones, was seen as an independent trade corridor bypassing the West. Analysts from Brookings, CSIS, and the Atlantic Council warned it could be part of China's debt trap strategy or a backdoor for economic influence in the Southern Hemisphere. As a result, from 2015 to 2023, while not openly opposing the project, many Western financial institutions were reluctant to fund or diplomatically support it, leading to a strategic freeze. Thus, the project faded into obscurity. However, after nearly a decade of dormancy, the Brazil-Peru Transcontinental Railway, backed by Chinese funding and technical support, is entering a robust revival phase, marking one of the most significant strategic infrastructure moves in South America in recent years. From initial paper concepts, the project has progressed to concrete policy actions, with firm commitments from Brazil, Peru, and China. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's administration has clearly prioritized transcontinental infrastructure to boost exports to Asia, particularly China, Brazil's top trade partner. Within the BRICS Plus framework, Brazil has resumed negotiations with China on the Amazon Railway, focusing on two key issues. One notable Brazilian proposal is using non-USD currencies, including the Chinese yuan, CNY, and Brazilian real, BRL, to reduce reliance on the US dollar in strategic projects, aligning with the global de-dollarization trend. The project is seen as part of Brazil's push to enhance its role in global logistics beyond traditional US influence. Chinese technical and financial support signals the formation of alternative trade routes bypassing traditional sea lanes, where the Panama Canal is pivotal. These talks have been confirmed by Reuters and official sources from Brazil's Ministry of Economy, covering route engineering, construction technology, and public-private financial cooperation mechanisms. In 2024, Peru's government officially included the Transcontinental Railway in its national infrastructure strategy to 2030, announced by its Ministries of Transport and Economy. This is a significant step, establishing the legal and budgetary foundation for the project, a prerequisite for real-world implementation. Chancay Port, the railway's endpoint, is one of the largest new ports under construction on South America's Pacific coast. With a $1.3 billion investment from China's COSCO, it was largely completed by late 2024. Analyses from Peru Rail and the Belt and Road Institute suggest that, if completed, the railway could cut Brazil to China shipping times from 35 days to 25 days, accelerating supply chains and reducing logistics costs by 30–40% depending on the cargo. Peru has also finalized technical feasibility studies for its domestic section and is promoting public-private partnership (PPP) investments with partners from Asia and Europe. Since late 2024, CGTN and Xinhua, China's two largest state media outlets, have published a series of articles on the Atlantic-Pacific connectivity strategy. These reports frame the Brazil-Peru Railway not as a mere transport project, but as a strategic pillar of the Belt and Road in the Western Hemisphere, with clear objectives. Securing Brazil's agricultural and rare earth supplies, including soybeans, beef, bauxite, and niobium, goods China critically lacks amid global trade tensions. Accessing Atlantic markets, including Argentina, Uruguay, and West Africa, through logistics infrastructure linked to Chancay Port. Creating a U.S. independent supply chain, especially as trade wars and tech competition intensify. Notably, in November 2024, President Xi Jinping personally attended Chancay Port's inauguration in Peru, an event Chinese media called a turning point for transcontinental connectivity. April 2025. A high-level delegation from China State Railway Group and China's Ministry of Transport visited Brasilia, meeting Brazil's Ministries of Economy and Transport to discuss technical details. Route mapping, financing, construction, timelines, phasing, and contractor selection. May 2025. Peru's Economy Minister Raúl Pérez Reyes proposed a trilateral summit with China and Brazil to establish a unified legal framework and coordinate cross-border construction segments. This diplomatic step is crucial for project realization. These developments show the project is moving beyond paper ideas into practical implementation. Changsha Port, the critical link, is largely complete, providing the physical foundation for the railway. All three governments have issued policies embedding the project in national strategies. The use of non-USD currencies, combined with the goal of reshaping supply chains outside US-led systems, signals this is no ordinary railway. It's a new economic strategic corridor, led by China, marking a milestone on the global infrastructure map. Spanning roughly 3,650 kilometers, the railway will cross the Amazon rainforest, the arid Cerrado plains, and notably the Andes, where average elevations exceed 4,000 meters. For context, this route is longer than the Los Angeles to New York route, 4,500 kilometers with detours, and nearly matches the UN's Trans-Asian Railway in scope. The total investment for the South American Transcontinental Railway is estimated at $60 to $80 billion, a colossal sum that dwarfs most global infrastructure projects. The Andes segment, alone with its rugged terrain and intense geological activity, is projected to consume up to 40% of the budget. This region demands specialized techniques like drilling tunnels tens of kilometers long at over 4,000 meters, stabilizing unstable ground, and ensuring safety in low-pressure, high-variability temperature environments. To grasp the financial scale, consider these comparisons. The $80 billion figure is double the cost of Spain's entire high-speed rail network, built over 3 decades from 1992 to 2020. A single South American railway, if completed, could outstrip the budget of a continental-scale European system. It's triple the annual GDP of Bolivia, a neighboring country, with an economy of about $27 billion 2024 data. In other words, the railway's cost equals 3 years of Bolivia's national output. These figures not only highlight the project's financial enormity, but reflect the political commitment and geopolitical ambition behind it, especially as much of the funding may come from China, which is both financier and strategic architect of this new transcontinental link. Currently, a container from São Paulo, Brazil, to Shanghai, China, takes 35 to 40 days by sea, mostly via the Panama Canal. With the new railway, transit time could drop to 6 to 7 days to reach Changsha Port on Peru's Pacific coast, plus a short sea leg to China's major ports. Total transit time could be slashed by over 75%, making Brazil a global export powerhouse, a direct competitor to Southeast Asia in speed and cost for deliveries to China. Even more striking is the logistics cost reduction. According to the South American Logistics Institute, replacing traditional sea routes with multimodal transport, rail plus short sea, could save 30–40% on logistics costs for key exports like soybeans, copper, rare earths, and lithium by eliminating complex transshipments, high storage fees, and delays at intermediate ports. Specifically, each 40-foot container exported from Brazil to China could save $800 while $200, giving Brazilian exporters a significant edge. For China, accessing strategic resources like lithium, copper, and iron ore via this corridor could be 15–20% cheaper by cutting logistics intermediaries and shortening delivery times, reducing price volatility risks. This isn't just a railway. It's a redefinition of global trade maps, where China bypasses strategic sea routes like Panama, and South America becomes a new link in the trans-Pacific supply chain. Under proposed development scenarios by Brazilian and Peruvian infrastructure consultants, if fully completed, the railway could handle up to 10 million TEU annually, half the container volume through the Panama Canal in 2023, 20.5 million TEU. Even in its initial phase, with a trial capacity of 3 to 4 million TEU year, the railway could significantly ease pressure on the US-Asia maritime supply chain, which has been overloaded since COVID-19 due to surging demand, port congestion, and global container shortages. This shift would not only relieve ports like Los Angeles, Manzanillo, or Callao, but open a new logistics gateway for South America's interior, especially Brazil's agricultural hubs like Mato Grosso, Goiás, and Rondônia. The railway's key distinction from traditional sea routes lies in its prioritized cargo structure. This isn't just for soybeans or corn, it's a trade corridor for 21st century strategic resources. Key cargo groups expected to dominate include soybeans, beef, corn, and timber. Brazil's staple agricultural exports, critical to China's food security, especially as it seeks alternatives to US imports. Lithium, copper, iron, ore. Essential for EV batteries, chip production, and renewables. Bolivia and Brazil hold over 40% of Latin America's untapped lithium reserves. Rare earths and light crude oil. Resources China is strategically stockpiling amid trade tensions with the West. Chinese electronics. In the reverse direction, China plans to use the railway to deliver electronics, industrial equipment, and consumer goods deep into Latin America's interior, cutting transit times and costs compared to Asia-US Panama routes. With this structure, the railway isn't just about hauling goods. It's the backbone of the global tech supply chain, where South American raw materials feed Chinese value-added production, then return to Latin American markets in a complete geo-economic cycle. Since the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, the US has viewed the Western Hemisphere, especially South America, as its inviolable geopolitical backyard. But in the 21st century, this dynamic is shifting rapidly. Through economic partnerships rather than military presence, China has steadily emerged as the leading trade partner for major South American economies such as Brazil, Chile, Peru, and Argentina. Now, Beijing isn't stopping at trade. It aims to anchor this strategy with permanent infrastructure, immune to single political shifts. The Transcontinental Railway is part of that strategy. It disrupts the US-controlled maritime logistics structure, particularly choke points like the Panama Canal and Pacific coastal routes. By linking the Atlantic to the Pacific, China offers an alternative to existing US-monitored sea lanes, gaining a land corridor free from interference. If successful, this would be the first time in modern history a non-Western power owns a transcontinental infrastructure route in the Americas, a notable reorientation in regional trade infrastructure. Currently, over 80% of South America to Asia cargo travels by sea, via the Panama Canal or Cape Horn, long, costly routes vulnerable to geopolitical tensions or climate disruptions. Once complete, the new railway will reshape global supply chains, turning Brazil into China's largest raw material warehouse, especially for 21st century essentials. Batteries and EVs, lithium from Bolivia, copper from Peru, metallurgical coal from Brazil. Food security, soybeans, beef, and grains to meet China's vast demand. Clean industry, rare earths and industrial minerals critical for batteries, solar panels, and semiconductors. Beyond transport, Chinese firms like COSCO Shipping, CRRC, Rail, and BYD, EVs, are establishing local production chains, bringing tech and capital to Brazil, creating a made in South America for China ecosystem. With transit speeds 3 to 4 times faster, times cut by over 75%, and logistics costs down 30 to 40%, this project could position South America as a new global supply chain hub, rivaling Southeast Asia. The environmental downside cannot be ignored. The railway will cross dozens of biosphere reserves and pristine Amazon forests, considered the planet's last green lung. Over 600 indigenous communities, from Bolivia to Peru, face impacts, including 15 isolated tribes with minimal modern contact. NGOs like Amazon Watch, Rainforest Foundation, and even Brazilian congressional groups have raised alarms. However, China is trying to learn from past criticism. After backlash over green debt traps in early BRI projects, Beijing pledges to apply green BRI standards, including building elevated bridges and viaducts instead of clearing dense forests, routing to avoid sensitive conservation areas, consulting indigenous communities with promises of economic benefits and local development support. Though skepticism remains, This could be a test for BRI 2.0, where China must not only build, but also preserve environments and win local trust. If completed, the South American Transcontinental Railway won't just be infrastructure. It's a significant shift in regional infrastructure dynamics that the U.S. has held in the Western Hemisphere for 2 centuries, since the Monroe Doctrine of 1823. The U.S. has historically maintained regional connectivity through strategic assets like the Panama Canal and maritime presence. The Brazil-Peru Railway, with Changsha Port funded by China, creates an entirely new transcontinental transport route, bypassing Western-controlled territories or ports. This is the first route in history to directly link the Atlantic and Pacific without touching the U.S. or Panama, reducing Washington's traditional influence in logistics routing strategic goods, such as lithium, copper, rare earths, and soybeans, which were once reliant on long sea routes, will now move directly from Brazil to China, via a dedicated overland corridor, creating an alternative logistics path beyond traditional maritime choke points. A particular concern for Washington is the non-USD payment mechanisms Brazil and China are testing under BRICS Plus. Per Brazil's Ministry of Economy and CGTN talks on using the yuan, CNY, real, BRL, or a BRICS payment system for this logistics corridor began in mid-2024. If successful, this would be one of the first transcontinental logistics corridors globally not using the USD as the primary currency. The consequence? The USD's role in global trade, already challenged by trade wars and financial sanctions, would weaken further, especially in Latin America. With this railway, China isn't just moving goods. It's establishing a tech logistics political corridor stretching thousands of kilometers across South America's heart. Through state-owned firms like COSCO Shipping, China Railway, Huawei, and BYD, China can deploy high-tech equipment, AI, 5G, surveillance, to logistics hubs in Peru and Brazil. Expand cross-border logistics and data security networks for Chinese firms producing locally. Amplify soft political influence via investments, scholarships, Confucius Institutes, and media partnerships, a strategy proven in Africa and Southeast Asia. Washington analysts warn, while the U.S. debates defense budgets, China is investing in logistics infrastructure to enhance global trade, connectivity without military bases or aircraft carriers. Notably, the US and EU, which once dismissed or delayed Amazon infrastructure proposals due to high costs and environmental risks, are now responding. In April 2025, officials from the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, and Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, approached Peru with offers to fund supporting branch lines rather than the Chinese-led main route. The EU, via its Global Gateway Initiative, is also discussing with Brazil the possibility of providing green funding and sustainable construction tech for Amazon-dependent segments, a soft counter to BRI. Clearly, the infrastructure race in South America has begun, no longer just a three-nation affair, but a global chessboard where superpowers vie for influence with every kilometer of track. This railway is more than infrastructure. It represents a major evolution in global trade routes and highlights how countries are investing in cross-continental connectivity to strengthen their long-term economic positioning. The railway, from the Atlantic through the Amazon, Andes, to the Pacific, doesn't just move goods faster. It opens a new soft power corridor where infrastructure becomes a strategic tool, and the language of containers, ports, and rails replaces traditional diplomatic declarations. How do you think this railway will reshape the Western Hemisphere's dynamics? Could it become China's new land belt in the Western Hemisphere? How should the U.S. respond? Reinvest in regional infrastructure and cooperation, or pursue strategic confrontation with BRI? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Top 10 Discoveries Official to stay updated on the latest insights into what's truly shaping the world right now. We'll be back with more notable developments, epic projects, and untold stories from across the globe. See you next time.